The Y4000 is yet another one of these cheap Chinese miniature cameras. It's basically the big brother of the Y3000 that I previously tested, although it has very similar core features in terms of an 8 megapixel still image and HD video that was recorded at 30 frames per second. I have to say though, as we'll see, the image quality, particularly in video, is much better. Let's take a way around the camera. Slowly turn the camera on here by pressing down the shutter button as you would do on the Y3000. And as you might notice, there's this thing that looks like a bit like a photomic head you might have found on one of the old Nikons. Flip it up and you get a flash light. It's really just an LED. So let's move around the camera now. Let's go down to the base. Here we have an SD slot that will take up to a 256GB card and a USB-C, which is an important upgrade from the old model. We'll rotate round to the side now, and as you can see, we've got, just as in the old model, a rocker switch with two buttons labelled plus and minus now, which makes it a little bit clearer. Holding down the bottom button, or the minus one, as you can see in still mode, allows you to adjust between various filter settings. Holding the top button lets you move between video settings and then on to playback. Once in playback, you can use both the plus and minus button to move through your images, and to get out of this you'll hold down the plus button. Looking at the camera, you can also add on a little power drive or power bank. This adds another 300 milliamps of power to your camera in terms of battery life, and it's simply clicked in at the bottom. It will charging the camera up. It doesn't do pass-through signaling, so if you're going to connect the camera to get files off, you have to connect the camera directly using the USB-C cable. As you can see, there are 3 blue LEDs to tell you how much charge you've left when using the power bank, and obviously they'll also show you a flash to show you when it's charging. So in recap, the camera takes 8 megapixel stills in a 4:3 format plus HD video at 30 frames per second. We've got 256GB support, but your cards will need to be formatted to FAT32, and that can be an issue with bigger cards because they're often pre-formatted to other formats. In terms of the battery, you have 180 milliamps on the internal camera battery, but the power bank will add another 300 if you choose to use it. The box is really nice. I have to say I'm quite impressed by it. It's got a little clip, but there is some dubious language used on the box, and there's a little bit of an issue with this image of the rear 1.44-inch LCD. There's no frame lines or markings on the real LCD. As you can see, the box contains a small keyring, a cheap wrist strap, as well as a USB-C cord and a manual. Let's move on and have a look at the setting the files for the device. You can go, as with the Y3000, into the root folder when you have the SD card in, and it'll have a file marked time. This will show a universal timestamp. It always defaults back to a setting, but you can alter this. But if you open it up in a notepad, you'll see there's some issues with this. If you can solve this by going into WordPad, I found, and that allows you to edit the file quite satisfactorily. One thing you can't do is turn the stamp on and off as you can in the Y3000. There is no Y or N that exists on the file, and adding them in doesn't make a difference. It just gets blanked out when the card is reloaded. It's worth noting when you turn the camera back on, it will default back to the factory setting in this file, so don't expect it to show the time you've set, but once you've done it, it will change the time. We'll move on to look at stills now. The camera takes 8 megapixels, and I think they're interpolated. I was a bit surprised with this, actually, and I'll start with nighttime shots. It actually looks quite good on these. I was quite subtly impressed with these. Not spectacular, but better than I thought they could be. And equally, if you get it on a bold, solid coloured object, the image looks surprisingly good. You don't get any XF data, again, like the Y3000, but the image quality is set much higher. The JPEG image quality on saving is set at 70%. It's still lower than many digital cameras, but it's much, much higher than the 20% used by the Y3000. And this, I think, gives you a better image quality. However, that soon breaks down when you get more complex images, and I think you can start to see the telltale signs of interpolation on these. Things look a bit murky. They're not awful, but certainly it's a bit of a letdown if you compare them to the nighttime and solid shots. You'll notice noise starting to creep in lower light shots, and that's fairly evident. Using computer screen text to look at abnormalities, you can see you get ghosting around the text, although it's actually relatively easy to read, which is quite impressive for such a little small camera. The image quality is better centrally but falls off towards the edges, and then you can notice obvious radial distortion. There's some soft vignetting around the edges as well. The camera offers a set of filters. There's 3 standard colour ones, which are little use for most folk. Black and white's perhaps more helpful, and there's a sepia, which is far too orange for its own good. It's the one thing I think the Y3000 managed better. Flash is helpful in very low light situations, but here's Lola under normal indoor lighting. She looks fine on the standard still shot. Flash doesn't add anything, as you can see here. Let's move on to video footage. I'm going to show initially Y4000 footage in good light. This will be followed by the Y3000. In both those files, I'll keep the audio turned on, and for complete comparison, we'll chuck in some footage from the Pixel 7.
Okay, this is example pan in good light.
I'll not lie, the footage is not much better than a phone, and a budget one at that, from about 4 or 5 years ago, but it's not awful and it's reasonable in daylight in that text. You wouldn't use it if you were a videographer, but for fun, maybe lo-fi videos, it has its pluses.
This is video test.
It is way better than the footage you can see here from the Y3000, however, which is slightly distorted and skewed and much more looking like it's had an oil filter applied to it.
Comparative footage taken on a Google Pixel.
However, when you compare both of these to this,
just to illustrate against
7 images, it's out of the league, really.
3000.
The audio quality is much better here, although the Pixel is picking up a lot of wind noise, but it's a stabilized image from a camera that is capable of doing reasonably good 4K, let alone HD. Let's go back to the Y4000 in a much lower light conditions. Image quality isn't, again, that awful, given how much this thing costs, although much more granular.
Onto the bridge. It's a lot darker than I think I'm seeing on the screen, but it'll give you an idea of what this footage looks like.
The camera can also be used as a webcam. You wouldn't want to use its audio features, so a headset or other mic would be required, but I guess it's passable at a push. It really is looking a bit dated compared to modern proper HD webcams, but if you were stuck, you could get away with this. This is quite a lot of fun for 10 to 20 quid. Yeah, the still images aren't brilliant, but they're still better than the Y3000. Video is considerably better and looks about mobile phone footage from a reasonable budget phone from about 10, 15 years ago. You could use it, I guess, for a project trying to do a retro-styled video, but you'll need to add your own sound on top. Importantly, I say 10 to 20 quid, because there's some odd little sites out there and some resellers looking for you to spend £40 or more in these. They're not worth it. The power bank is nice if you can get it as a fairly cheap optional extra, but it really adds nothing to the experience. It's a bit of fun. Give it a go. Hope you enjoy. Bye.